And I want to share briefly on 4 things. First thing that will get you into the mess of the trap of debt is what I call poor stewardship of financial resources. You see, it is not in doubt that we all need money, that to run our personal economies, we must have money. And we wake up every morning and we are thinking about money, and we are praying for money, and we're looking for jobs, and we're starting businesses, and somewhere along the way, God blesses us with businesses, God blesses us with jobs, and we begin to receive some money in our hands. Now, the little or the much that God gives us, we have also failed to be able to learn how to use it in a manner that will enable it to sustain us from this end month to the next end month, and even do bigger things beyond sustaining us from end month to end month. So our failure to know how to utilize that which God has blessed in our hands has been the first blunder, has been the first key into the trap of debt. Let me say something about income. You know, the income we get from going to work, be it a salary or wages, the income you get from running your business actively, what we have called active income, is meant not only to sustain us from payday to payday, but to also be able to act as a seed for multiplication. Right? So, in other words, it's like we are given some platform, some starting point, some ground on which we need to step. So our active income ideally needs to be our starting point, our stepping ground. And therefore that means we must learn to manage the money that we get from the active income, from the active engagements, so that we are able to use that money to sustain us from end month to end month, but beyond that, be able to allow us retain part of that money, right? And then be able to multiply what we retain so that we begin to attract more money. And that is the whole process that I call the wealth creation process. And I alluded on the same in my 5th book, Breaking Free from the Trap of Debt. I've shared in a chapter there on how to the whole concept of what I call the wealth creation cycle. And I figure that if we have to create wealth, then money must travel continuously through 3 boxes. And that is the box of money, acquisition, and management. That is the first box. This is a box where we are going to work, opening our businesses. This is the box that receives the money we get at the end of the month, at the end of the day. It's the largest box because it has everyone who is financially active. Now, the next box is the box called the money retention box. But how you manage money in the first box determines whether you will play in the other 2 boxes or you will only dwell in the first box. The first box is the busiest. So when we receive our active income, in the first box of money acquisition and management, we're supposed to manage that money in such a way that beyond sustaining us, it will allow us to retain part of it. And I like saying, if you are to judge people, because it's not right to judge people, but if you must judge people financially, then do not judge them on how much they earn, but how much they are able to retain, right? Because there are so many people who will earn, say, $1 million bob per month, but they end up utilizing 1.1 every month. In other words, they are going to the negative every other month. But there's another person who is earning 20,000 per month, but every month he or she is able to retain 5,000 bob. In the fullness of time, the 20,000 bob is far much better in the language of wealth creation. So the next box is money retention. And initially we want to retain money through a process of savings. Yeah, and we like saying that money will only understand the language of save me today, I save you tomorrow. So as you retain your money, you have to define why you are retaining money. I meet many people who, the truth is that out of the many who earn something, it's only a handful who are able to save. Now, out of the many that are able to save, we have a group there that do not even know why they are saving. Now, those who try to know why they are saving for a rainy day. So if you are to dig deeper into those that are trying to save, majority of them will be saving for a rainy day. Very few are saving for multiplication. And I'm just trying to trigger your thinking. For you to be able to play through the wealth creation cycle fully, then you have to retain money, also focusing towards sending that money to work for you. And that is the third box of money multiplication, where you are now placing the money that you have initially retained to go and work for you. Because money is the best servant. Money does not get tired. Money does not have mood swings. Money does not sleep. Money does not go on leave. So if you placed your money in a good place, then as you go to your bed, that money is doing something, and we begin to expect returns. So we send our money to multiply through the common process that you have called investments, right? And after you have identified where you want to place your money, and you've placed your money and you have invested, then you expect some returns. The returns go to pour back into box 1 of money acquisition. That means box 1 begins to bulge. If the first income was salary, and you have played through the second box and the third box, and you've placed your money somewhere, let's say that money is earning some interest or dividends or whatever form of returns that you will get depending on where you placed the money, then those returns begin to pour back into the first box. So the first box begins to bulge. So then that means that if you continue managing your money well, you are going to be able to retain even more than you did the first time. So as you rotate your money through this cycle, then you begin to stand a better chance to play effectively into the wealth creation cycle. I'm just mentioning it's a whole conversation, and maybe one of these days we will talk about it. Let me come back to the first box, the box where we receive money, the money acquisition and management box. The choices we make in this box will be so crucial, because it is in this box where we also get trapped in debt when we fail to manage our money appropriately. When we fail to have a plan for the money that we receive in this box, when we fail to give names to the money that we receive in this box, money that does not have names will answer to any name that you will call it, right? If you do not put a tag on your money, and if you do not tag rent on this money, you do not tag food on this money, you do not tag school fees on this money. If the money just exists without names, it will answer to any name. You call it weekend out, it will respond. You call it entertainment, it will respond. You call it school fees, it will respond. Whatever you call it, because it does not have a name. So it is in the first box that we place names on our money. It is in the first box that we give our money identity, that we exercise control over our money and say, when my money comes, I want it to go this way, or the other way. Failure to which, chances are high that you find that a couple of days after you receive your income, be it from business or employment, then you do not have the money. If the money gets depleted a day after income, the big question then remains, what are you going to do in the next 29 days before the other money comes? And that is when the temptation to start borrowing begins to come in. But what will you be borrowing for? You see, if your income that is supposed to sustain you for the next 30 days is gone, then you are likely going to be borrowing for consumption. And as I mentioned the first Tuesday, that when you borrow for consumption, you begin to eat your tomorrow today. So the biggest question has always been, what will you do when tomorrow comes? There are people who already consumed their July income the first week of July, because we are borrowing and sending our lenders to end month and telling them, Salo ikikam, I will sort you. When this business money comes, I will sort you. And then we oversend them because we send so many of them more than what is going to come. And then that is why I was saying the other time that payday has become one of the most stressful days for so many people. Poor stewardship of financial resources, poor management of money in the first box is catastrophic, because it begins to lure you closer to borrowing for consumption. Here is the trick. When you borrow for consumption, a lot of times you're borrowing for recurrent needs. If you borrow to buy a packet of unga or any food item, the justification you have is that you borrowed to buy a good thing. If someone out there asks you, you will say, I borrowed for a good thing. I borrowed to buy food. But the trick is here. If you borrow today to buy a packet of unga, you will eat the unga today. But what I can assure you, and what is obvious, is that tomorrow you will be hungry again. That means you will go to borrow again. And debt does not come freely. Debt is costly money. Whether you are borrowing at 0 rate or whatever rate, debt will always carry the burden element in it. So as you borrow for consumption, you're setting up big time for burning your fingers in future. And that is how you begin to attract the trap of debt into your life. And under the stewardship conversation, you find some people are wasteful. They will cook food fit for 20 people when there are only 4 in a household. And then they will throw away the remainder as leftovers. You're also setting yourself for trouble ahead, because the food for 20 people costed money. And you're only 4 of you. That means you have wasted money. You have wasted food for 16 people. You convert that into money, and that is money you're throwing to the dustbin. So we also have to be cautious about such wastefulness. And that is the first thing that will get you closer to getting trapped into that prison of debt. Let me stop there for point 1. It's a huge conversation. Each of these points is a conversation that could last us for 2 hours. The second thing that will endear you to the trap of debt is what I call limiting money mentalities. There is a way we think around money that could also be limiting. You know, every action we take in life as human beings is not spontaneous. Every action originates from a thought. Now, as human beings, we are constantly facing financial needs. Every day, you wake up in the morning, you're already facing financial needs, right? And there is demand for you to spend money in the course of your day so many times. So this is what begins to happen. When we are faced with the need to utilize money, different people will have different thoughts on how to get that money that is needed. All right? And that is how I came up with what I call the 4 money mentalities. Also another huge conversation. Excuse me, but let me just mention in passing. I figured that in life, money can either be stolen, begged for, borrowed, or earned. Right? And that is how I developed the 4 money mentalities. And the first mentality is the stealing mentality. We have people, when they are faced with a financial need, the first thought that crosses their mind is, where can I get this money without the owner's knowledge or permission? What deal can I cut? And this group is broad. It goes beyond the people who will steal from you at gunpoint. It goes beyond the pickpockets. It begins to include all of us who steal by pen, all of us who are corrupt, all of us who will do anything to get some money from a deal perspective. It includes all of us who come back and report that that we went for a business trip when we didn't. That we were on a job-related trip when we were sleeping in our houses so that we can get that money. It begins to include everyone else who is involved in fraud. All right? Such people, even if they have earned today, when they have a need for money, their mind rushes to where they can steal the money, even if their current salary is in the account. And that is the stealing mentality. And the second mentality is the begging mentality. These guys, when they have a financial need, the first thought that crosses their mind is the thought of who can help me. So their driving word is help. All right? And when someone says help me, please do not mistake them for borrowers. Borrowers will promise to pay. So these guys will go by the word help. Please help me. Help me with a K. Now, woe unto you if you give them this K and expect them to pay you back. Have you ever gone to ask someone for your money and they're like, pesa gani? Boss, that 1K. And they're like, I thought you were helping me. Right? These are the guys I'm talking about. Now, these are the guys who have a list of all their relatives, all their friends, and they know when their friends will be earning or when their friends in business will have gotten money from a big deal, and they'll be waiting. And they know so-and-so can't fail to give me 500 bob. So-and-so can't fail to pay rent for me. So-and-so can't fail to do this and the other. Right? So they will be telling you to help them. Or maybe I'm talking to you and you're one of them. Right? That is the begging mentality. Those people who believe that there can be money for nothing. Then there is a group that have what I call the borrowing mentality. Now this is the largest group. Now these guys, when they have a financial need, the thought that crosses their mind first is who can sort me so that when mine comes, I sort them back. Who can lend me money so that when mine comes, I will pay them back. Now this group looks fantastic. They are not thieves. They are not beggars. They are promising to pay back. And in fact, pay back with something on top. Very interesting group. And so many people have fallen into this category to an extent that, and I'm sure you've met people who, even when they have their own money in their hand, and you begin to suggest to them or behave in a manner to suggest that you have money that you don't have use for, they'll be telling you to give them the money because they always have some use for money. Right? So that is the borrowing mentality. Then lastly, we have the earning mentality. These are the people, and this is the mentality I want to invite all of us to. These are the people who, when they have financial needs, the first question that crosses their mind is, what can I do to make money to sort this need? So for them, when they go to borrow, for instance, they are going to borrow with the thought of, if I borrow this money and use it to do this, I will make money to sort this problem. The guys with a borrowing mentality, borrowing is an end for them. So they borrow and say, this is the way to solve this problem. That is the difference between the two approaches, the borrowing and the earning mentalities. Now, earning is very hard for so many people. Earning means that you have to go to work and wait for pay. Earning means that you have to go to your business, trade, and wait for profit. Earning means that you have to place your money in the name of an investment and wait for return. You realize in all those options, we have wait, wait, wait. Now this patience is what has defeated so many people. So many people want solutions here and now. And that is where the blunder comes in. So the three mentalities, stealing, begging, and borrowing, I call them limiting mentalities because they easily drive you into the trap of debt. If you have a borrowing mentality, you have a straight ticket. No negotiation about it. You have a straight ticket to the trap of debt. If you ever find yourself looking for debt as your number one option when you have a financial need, you are a straight candidate. You have a highway to the trap of debt. Now, stealing and begging, I call them limiting because if you fail to get someone or somewhere to steal, if you fail to get someone to help you, someone you can beg from, then the next easier option, because these two categories are used to easier ways of getting money, so the nearest to them is borrowing. So when a thief does not find a place to steal, when a beggar does not find a place to beg, the easiest option is borrowing, where they can get the money and promise to pay. As to whether they will pay is a different conversation altogether. So that is another thing that will get you into the trap of debt. So then we move to number 3, borrowing blunders. Right? We started by mentioning in week 1 that debt is here to stay. Of course, no one will force you to take up debt. No one will force you to borrow. Sometimes it's even better to be afraid if you do not have a better use for borrowed funds. Sometimes it's better to even be afraid and stay safe than borrow just because everyone seems to be borrowing. You've heard people say, "Mwanaume ni deni, you can't do without debt." The truth is you can do without it. I have met people and they confirm that they don't survive on debt, not because they earn so much, but because they learned how to manage themselves long time ago, and they have accepted that they are risk averse, and they're just playing it cool. But at least they are not facing the pangs of the trap of debt that we talked about in the first week. Now that debt is here to stay, so many of us will at some point find ourselves entangled in debt. And these days, the options are so many. The temptation is real. In fact, for so many people, COVID has actually helped things because many lenders have tightened their approach to lending. And so many people have been denied credit in this season. Credit that perhaps would have gone into not so important or urgent usage. Right? So we will find ourselves interacting with debt. We will find ourselves borrowing, whether it's from your mobile phone or the bank or your friends or Shylocks or what have you. But if you do not know how borrowing is done, if you do not know what to consider before you borrow, then you're beginning to set yourself for trouble ahead. And that's why I took time to also pen down in my 4th book, Debt is Good Only If You Master It, just a few tips on what you need to really put into consideration before you walk into a lender's office, before you begin dialing the buttons of your phone or swiping your phone screen to borrow. Because if you make certain blunders, you'll also set yourself for trouble. Even if you have the right mentality, even if you are a good steward of financial resources. You know, sometimes you have a very good need for borrowing or what you think is good. And then you go and borrow and make some blunders. And you find yourself burning your fingers. And you get yourself into the trap of debt. Now, the danger of the trap of debt is that a lot of times it doesn't matter how you got there. When we meet there, trapped all of us, it's like when we meet in a prison cell. We are all here. You stole some goat. Another person killed another one, another person stole some money. All of us are here. We are all prisoners. We are imprisoned. We are all inmates. Right? So you could be a good steward. Today you've chosen to borrow for what seems to be a very good reason for borrowing. Then you blunder. I have 3 sets of borrowing blunders. And again, a day will come, we will talk about borrowing in detail. When I'll be opening your world to the realities of borrowing and how best you can approach borrowing if you must borrow. There's a set of blunders that I call blunders before you borrow. Right? Like before you borrow, you must ask yourself, why am I going into debt? Do I really need to borrow? Is there another alternative? Can I delay this need until my money comes? If I must borrow, how much do I need to borrow? That's a conversation that needs to be in your mind before you start approaching your lender or dialing those things that we dial as we seek to borrow. Now, if you fail to consider why you are borrowing, if you fail to take yourself through the process of knowing why you are borrowing, and we will talk about what I call purpose-driven borrowing, and we will begin to see best approaches to borrowing, then you will end up borrowing for things that did not warrant you to borrow. You will end up borrowing when you ought not to have borrowed. And that will be problematic for you. Then, it's also important that you also consider where the debt you're planning to take will leave you. We rarely think about it. As long as we have ability and we have a need, we just borrow. Then when deductions come, reality dawns that actually you didn't have money to repay that debt. Then there's a set of blunders that I call blunders during borrowing. These ones are many. When you disregard to look at the cost of borrowing. Someone is giving you money at 100% per week and you're just taking because all your eyes are seeing is the money. Then you are also setting yourself for trouble. When you fail to compare lenders, when you fail to look at the fine print, and you look at them and you say, these writings are so tiny, you can't read, then the day you are in trouble, that's the day the lender refers you to the same fine print, and you try reading and you realize that there is a lot that you overlooked. And lenders have known that we are in a hurry to get money. They give us the application form when they have already marked X's where we need to sign. And so many of us get there and ask, where do I sign? And we append our signatures so quickly. It's a blunder you're making. Failure to adhere to your qualifiability. When a lender tells you you can only qualify for 100,000, and because you have a need for 300,000, you insist. And even when this lender refuses, you go and lie to other lenders and get the money, get 300,000 at the ability of 100,000. When repayment day comes, reality dawns that you actually overborrowed. So many blunders. Then lastly, we have blunders I call blunders after borrowing. After the lender has disbursed the money to you, after you have received the borrowed funds, you could also blunder. And there are two things here. Number one, you could choose to divert the borrowed funds. And this is very catastrophic, especially for people in business. If you're a business person, and you get the temptation, and this temptation usually comes every time you get money, some thoughts begin to cook into your head. That's the time you remember that your car has stayed without going for service. That's the time you remember that something has been pending in your life. You have borrowed for business growth. And the lender has come and evaluated your business. And the lender lends you knowing that if I give you X amount, and you use it to do what you have intended to do, your business might grow at this rate, and you'll be able to repay our loan peacefully. And then you have been given 100,000 to grow your business, to increase your working capital, and you use 20,000 to complete paying your bride price. You're setting yourself for trouble because you'll not be able to grow the business as you intended, and therefore the income that will come from the business will not be as big as you had intended. Diversion of borrowed funds is dangerous, extremely dangerous. Every time you want to divert borrowed funds, just remember you are creating a future emergency. You're creating a future emergency. Man-made emergency. Yeah, and we will call them emergencies when that time comes. But they're not emergencies. An emergency is something that is unforeseen. If you check the definition of the word emergency, the key word there is unforeseen. So anything that you can foresee kills that objective from being an emergency. anything that you can foresee. That's why we will tell you, looking at you in the face, and tell you school fees is not an emergency. Right? I'm not saying that your child should stay at home, yet you have a borrowing ability. But I'm saying as you borrow, just remind yourself, just pinch yourself and tell yourself, I know that this is not an emergency. The last blunders after borrowing is that you could also borrow and refuse to pay. It is different when you are not able to pay, but there are people who have the ability to pay, but when repayment day comes, they realize that, hey, kumbe, this thing was a burden that I'm not willing to handle. And people refuse to pay. But that begins to eat into your future. A day will come when you genuinely need money, and with the advent of CRB and such things, you will need money and you will not be assisted. You know, you even have personal CRB. If you give money to your friend and your friend defaults and does not talk to you, does not pick your phones and disappears, your phone calls and disappears, you will also blacklist them and say, next time akikuja, I will not listen to them. And a day will come when that friend is also in a thick situation, and they come back to you and you remember what happened, and you find a nice reason or excuse not to lend to them again. You don't want to be in those shoes. And lastly, number 4, as we move closer to the end, is what I call unforeseen circumstances. Unforeseen circumstances. It is very rare that we will get everything right in its place in this life. You know, none of us knows how tomorrow will look like. We all are hopeful that we will have a better tomorrow. But the reality of life is that a certain time comes in life when the universe conspires to also put us to some test. And some things will happen that we never thought about, that we never expected would happen, that we were not willing or planning or thinking about. And when they happen, they throw so many people off balance. There are circumstances that will be unforeseen. Let me give you an example. After the 2007-2008 post-election violence, there are business people, and this is a real example that I've gotten from my engagements with business people. There are business people who had borrowed, and their loans were being repaid very well from business proceeds. And then their businesses got touched during that time. So technically, they are no longer able to continue repaying the debt, and especially if their business was their sole source of income. That means that their debt must then go into arrears. And that then means that as some of them begin to fight to cool down the lenders, they find themselves putting their hands in bigger trouble. You know, many borrowers do not know how to handle lenders. They are constantly running away from lenders. And this is a big problem. I like saying, when you are in trouble, never run away from your lender. Just talk to them. Just look at them in the face and explain something genuinely. Do not overpromise. And we will look at that next week as we talk about the real journey out of the prison of debt. So, there are people, when their accounts go into arrears, they begin to firefight. Because the lender is chasing them for the repayment, instead of explaining that this and this has happened and begin to think of other ways of raising money, they will rush into a Shylock to get some money to cool the lender. But for how long will you do that? If you are running a loan that needs to be repaid for 36 months, for how long will you run to, will you look for shortcuts to cool down your lenders? And then before you know it, you've grown your debt portfolio. Before you know it, you've expanded your pressure points. You know, I call every debt a pressure point. Yeah? So you had one debt, but now you've borrowed from 5, 10 more people as you try to address the same debt. But you're not looking for a final solution. For a solution that is lasting, you are only firefighting. Today, a relative could fall sick and everyone is looking up to you. And they fall sick when you least expect. And perhaps you've not prepared. So where does that leave you? So that begins to push many people into looking for ways to get money to sort out the sickness at home. You know, if you receive a call and you're told your mother or your brother is sick and they're in hospital, then this amount of money is needed. You did not expect, it is unforeseen. You didn't foresee such a situation coming. Chances are high that because this is an emotional thing, we begin to go into borrowing to address it. If you are not cautious, such borrowing could be your ticket to the trap of debt. That could be your starting point to getting yourself entangled into a cycle that will be so difficult to break. So am I saying we do not help? Am I saying that when unforeseen situations come, then we are helpless? No. The beauty of life today is that some of these things can be anticipated. For instance, it is common knowledge that at some point we will fall sick. And therefore, if you are able today to safeguard that health element in the name of health insurance cover, in the name of updating your NHIF and what have you, then do it now while you're still able. So that should a day come when that is needed, you do not have to go to your pocket to look for medication. That begins to lessen your chances of being forced to go into that borrowing. Then remember what we talked about in point 1. Proper financial stewardship, or proper stewardship of financial resources. Begin to set aside something as early as now when you are able, so that tomorrow when you get a call that someone needs drugs, then you can look back and say, at least I have somewhere that is not a borrowing that I can get the money and give for that particular need. So yes, it is true you cannot anticipate everything, but there are things we can anticipate, and then we have options that we can begin to take as we move forward. Thank you so much. Invite your friends on board. Be sure to share this video so that as many of us can plug in. May God bless you so much. I wish you a wonderful week ahead, and I'm signing out.